Let's try example 9 here. So this is another one of those where you can pull it apart and do square root of 8 over square root of 48. Or you could simplify the fraction first, totally up to you. Let's go ahead and simplify that. 8 over 48 reduces to, that would be, well, 8 goes into both of those, right? So that'd be 1 over 6. 8 times 6 is 48. All right, so now let's go ahead and pull this apart. So we can make that the square root of 1 over the square root of 6. Let's go ahead and simplify. The square root of 1, well, that's just 1, right? 1 times 1 gives you 1. Square root of 6, I can't break down any further, right? That would just be 3 times 2. We don't get anywhere. So this is 1 over the square root of 6. Now, you might think, oh, I'm totally done, but unfortunately, you're not. And this is really important. I would write this down. It is not considered fully simplified if there's a square root in the denominator. In the mathematical world, it's just not considered simplified. Okay, so I'm going to show you how we get rid of a square root in the denominator. And this is something you're going to use all through high school math, pre-cal especially. All right, so let's look back at this one. Okay, so if we have a square root left in our denominator, what we're going to do, it's just a little trick here, and it seems kind of weird at first, but you'll get used to this because you'll do so many of these. You're going to take this fraction, and you're going to multiply it by our little problem area, which is the square root of 6. I'm actually going to multiply it by the square root of 6 over the square root of 6. Okay, think about that. What am I essentially multiplying by? What does this reduce to? Root 6 over root 6, that would just reduce to 1, right? So we're taking something and we're multiplying it by the number 1, just a kind of a weird form of 1. So we're going to it's just a trick here that we can change the way that this looks. And this right here is going to get the square root out of this denominator. All right, so we're multiplying fractions, so you just multiply straight across. 1 times square root 6 is root 6. Now think about this. The square root of 6 times the square root of 6. We went over an example just like that. That would just be the number 6, right? Root 6 times root 6 would be the square root of 36, which just equals the number 6. So you can see how this trick works nicely because now we no longer have a square root in the denominator. Always check and see if it can be simplified. These 6's cannot be simplified. 1 is inside of radical and 1 is just the number 6. So don't try to simplify those. That would be final answer. Okay, let's try, I think this is our last one. Wait, just kidding, we have one more after this. Okay, lots of practice here. All right, example 10, we got square root 6 over square root 2. Okay, so I see a little trick that'll make this very easy, but let's go ahead and try getting the square root out of the denominator since that's what we're practicing right now. All right, so I can't have a square root in the denominator, so what I do is I multiply by that little problem guy, which is square root 2. Multiply by root 2 over root 2. Okay, multiplying straight across, root 6 times root 2 is just the square root of 12. Root 2 times root 2 is just the number 2. Now, double check this. See, okay, can I simplify this any further? There's no square root in the denominator, which is good, but I can simplify the square root of 12 further, right? So if you need to pull that out to the side, go ahead and do it. You can branch that out to 4 times 3, and the square root of 4 is 2. I think we've already done this one, right? So you would just be left with the square root of 3 there. All right, so we get 2 root 3, all divided by 2. Can we do anything else to simplify this? I see one more thing. We do have a 2 and a 2. We can reduce that to just 1, right? 1 over 1. So this actually reduces to just the square root of 3 because these would cancel out. Boom, you're done. I don't know if you recognized it, but we could have done this in really like one easy step. If you take this original one, you can work backwards if you have a square root divided by a square root and make that the square root of 6 over 2. Just kind of work in reverse. Well, what's 6 divided by 2? 3. That's a little bit easier. Okay, let's try one more here. You can pause it if you want and try to do this yourself. Okay, so on this one, let me make a side note. We could not do this. Just FYI, because there is not a square root over the 3 right here. So be careful there. All right, so let's go ahead and you can either start with multiplying by root 12 over root 12, Or if you notice, square root of 12 can be simplified. Let's actually simplify it first and see how that works out for us. We've done this one a lot of times already. That'd be the square root of 4 times square root 3. So just 2 root 3. Okay, so this is 3 over 2 root 3. Now I still have a square root in my denominator. I want to get rid of it. So let's go ahead and multiply by that problem guy. Now I see a lot of people try to multiply by the whole denominator, like 2 root 3 over 2 root 3. You can do that, it's just not necessary. It'd be a little bit more work. So let's actually still just multiply by root 3 over root 3. This will still work for us. Multiplying straight across up top, 3 times the square root of 3 would just be 3 square root 3. Okay, now look closely here. It's almost like you have a 1 outside of this, right? So outside numbers would be 2 times 1, which is 2. Square root 3 times square root 3 is just 3. So you're doing 2 times 3 in the denominator to give you 6. Now that simplifies a little bit more. You've got 3 over 6. That would be just 1 over 2. And of course, we don't have to write the 1 out to the side. So it'd just be root 3 over 2. All right, you guys try these ones. Do them on a whiteboard, do them in your notes, but pause this and then I'll put all the answers up. You can check and see how you did. And the correct answers for all 4 of these are right there. Check them, make sure you fully reduced everything. Now you have learned all the basics of simplifying radicals, so you guys go ahead and try this practice sheet.